Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the STEM Community Alliance Program webinar with UC. My name is Carmen, and I am the Program Coordinator for UC. UC is the Utah Society for Environmental Education, and our work is to promote excellence in environmental education and community engagement to connect all Utahns to their natural world. UC is the state affiliate of the North American Association for Environmental Education. There are over 50 state affiliates across the US, Canada, and Mexico, all working to elevate the field of EE. UC works to elevate the field of EE in Utah through our annual conference, awards, and recognitions of those in the field of EE across Utah, professional development opportunities that include Project Learning Tree, Project WET, the NAAE Guidelines for Excellence, and these trainings are appropriate for K-12 educators and non-formal educators as well. We work to advocate for the field of EE across Utah and continue to build and strengthen community partnerships and programs. Now this evening, we couldn't be more excited to have Fiona and Laura here from STEMCAP, and I will hand it over to you.
Great. Fiona, do you want me to share the screen or?
I can. Hold on just a sec.
Okay.
Oops. Hold on, it's thinking. Actually, let's just do, that's the wrong button. Come on, buddy. If you're able to,
Okay,
I might
yeah,
request. Sorry, the computer's not working.
I think you have to unshare for me to be able to share.
That's a good idea. Okay.
All right. Perfect. So as Carmen said, we are from the STEM Community Alliance program. I'm Laura George, and I'm the program manager for STEMCAP, as what we call it. I've been with STEMCAP for about 2.5 years. Before that, I had just graduated from the Environmental Humanities program at University of Utah, where I was focusing on different ways to make environmental education more inclusive and creating curriculums for sort of urban-based outdoor environmental education here in Salt Lake Valley.
And I am Fiona Kuzmak. I started with STEMCAP in August, so this is only my second semester working with the program. I'm the program coordinator, so I just kind of am more on the scheduling side. I talk to all of our presenters and I help Laura implement our programming. Before this, I had worked for a variety of different nonprofits. My degree is actually in art history, so I got my degree and then I went to a bunch of nonprofits. I worked for the Natural History Museum in their gallery programming department, and I worked doing science communication that way, working with volunteers and all that. And then the last 2 or 3 years, I was working in sexual violence prevention through the Rape Recovery Center as a victim advocate and at a therapy center for victims of domestic violence. So this role is kind of hand in hand working with vulnerable populations and allowing them to access environmental education. So we'll move on here. So STEMCAP, I'm just going to give you guys a rundown basically of the program and what YIC consists of, youth in custody, and then we'll move on to our programming aspect. STEMCAP is a project collaboratively run by the University of Utah and the Utah State Board of Education. So our director is a emeritus scholar out of the School of Biology, and we are funded by the Utah State Board of Education by a grant. And we were started in about 2017. So we're still a pretty young program. Our vision statement is all youth in custody connected creatively to STEM. our mission statement to provide pathways that broaden understanding and exchange between youth in custody and STEM communities. We kind of want to concentrate on like the creatively to STEM part, because we do want to kind of work hand in hand with our STEM collaborators and scientists, and we're starting to build a relationship with artists and more creative communities in Salt Lake to try and bring those two communities together and hopefully encourage our youth to engage with STEM in that way. And we want our presenters to get as much out of it as we hope our youth are. So just to briefly talk about what we mean by youth in custody. Youth in custody or youth in care are individuals under the age of 21 who are in custody of or receiving services from the Utah Department of Human Services or an equivalent Native American tribe who are being held in juvenile detention facilities. So this can include this can include youth who are dealing with the juvenile justice system, students who are incarcerated for any number of reasons. It can also include students in foster care. It can also include youth who are in mental health facilities. So it has a kind of a broad range of different definitions, and they're all kind of under the same umbrella of youth in custody. The second point we want to touch on is the Utah State Board of Education is responsible for the educational services of all these students who are in their care. So all students who are under the age of 21 who are on their way to getting their high school diploma are entitled to that by the state. The state is supposed to provide that for them. And so as a result, in a lot of the centers that we work with, in all of them for that matter, all the state-run ones, they also include a school that has teachers who are hired by the state to educate the students who live there. This final point is kind of just to bring you up to speed on some recent legislation that's gone through Utah. Recent eligibility for youth in custody services in Utah was expanded to 25 for particular cases, which is actually quite progressive in terms of juvenile justice. Most states it's 21 or 18 is when they stop being able to receive services that are in the juvenile justice system or in the youth in custody system. And Utah has decided that they're going to elevate that age to 25, which allows them to stay in those centers until that age in some cases. This isn't effectively, it hasn't gone into effect really, because it was only a couple of years ago that this happened. And the students who would be eligible would have had to be convicted under 18. So this is kind of a future thing. It's working its way through the system, and we're pretty excited about it. So this slide is just kind of to visually demonstrate the different steps along the way that a youth might travel through. The different steps that a youth might go to in the juvenile justice system. So from the time of being arrested or whatever else, the youth will go to a court hearing. They'll be processed through the juvenile justice system through the courts, and they might go to a detention center, which is equivalent to kind of a jail where they're kind of waiting for their sentencing. And that's usually a short-term center. From there, they might go to a youth services center or a community placement. Youth services center offer kind of early intervention services. They might have short-term crisis centers there. They might have counseling or school-based programs. Community placement is somewhat similar, but they're more community-based programs. And then in the far right corner, you have the secure care facility, which is equivalent to kind of an incarceration facility, a prison, where a student will have to go for long-term secure care. Those students will live and sleep and eat there and also go to school in those facilities, and that's where we do our programming. So this is kind of what we're calling the circle of care. They're all the different people who give students the services that they need. And it's kind of a given, you have your parent, your caregiver. They also work with caseworkers and the courts. And then in the top right, we have our educators. So we at STEMCAP, we do not interact with the parents, the caseworkers, or the courts. We're primarily involved with the educators at the secure care centers. And specifically, the ones that we usually interact with are the science teachers. And again, these are individuals who are hired by the state to offer a K-12 education to our students. So STEMCAP, this is our 2020 to 2021 school year. So fall 2020, spring 2021. And this is kind of just a demonstration of the number of workshops that we were able to execute that school year. You'll notice that we worked with about 6 different centers. It can range from 4 to 6 different centers every year, depending on availability, depending on what's going on. And you'll notice also that some of the centers have more programming than others. Decker Lake, for example, has a greenhouse, and so we're able to do a lot more of our conservation workshops there. And so that's something we're hoping to expand into more long-term projects, into more projects in the future. But for now, Decker Lake is kind of where we're doing those projects. You'll also notice up the number of workshops we did and versus the number of presenters we've had. We're pretty proud of that our number of our presenters have come back to present more than once. And we hope that that means that they're enjoying and getting a lot out of this whole process.
Yeah, and just to clarify, this is all of the programming we have done up to spring 2021. So from 2017 to 2021.
So this is just a rundown of what our process looks like from start to finish. We usually at the beginning of a semester will send out a call for presenters. If you're interested in working with us, please come work with us. The only exception to that is for our Mission STEMCAP presentations, in which we'll talk more about those in a little bit. But in that case, we have a specific environmental challenge that we're focusing on, and we'll go and we'll talk we'll go and recruit scientists who have that specific specialty to come and work with us. But in general, if we're doing like a topical presentation, a standalone presentation, we'll have people come to us, say they want to present with us, and then we'll talk to them. We'll distribute our documentation, our handbook and examples of past presentations, all that kind of stuff. And then we'll have a meeting with them to talk about when they're available. At the same time, we'll go to all of our centers and ask them the dates that they would like us to come with any number of topics, and then we'll kind of try and plug things in. Really, like I said on our last slide, like it really just depends on who's available when, and we kind of just try to make it all work based on everyone's availability. We'll then have the presenter meet with us and go through what they expect to present, the materials they expect to use. And then we'll kind of review with them what is permitted and what is not, because the facility is, they're somewhat strict. Sorry, my dog is whimpering on the floor. I think he's asleep. We'll go through that. We'll go through the list of materials that we think will be allowed and the ones that will not be allowed. We'll go through the presentation and make sure that all the content is either appropriate or age appropriate or whatever else, and make sure that we also include like a background for the scientists, because we really like to make that connection between how the scientists got to where they're at, and maybe what bumps they had along the way and all that kind of stuff. Then we'll have that presenter edit their materials, and then we'll bring them to the workshop. We like to come, Laura and I like to come to every workshop to see how the students are responding to the content, and just to see your presentation, because we're also interested. So this is just kind of a discipline graph. So this is just showing the different kinds of things that we've had people present in the past. You'll notice that the biological sciences and the environmental sciences are well represented on this graph. That is for a couple of reasons. One is that we are housed in the biology building on the U of U campus. We're in ASB. Our founder is an ecologist. We have a lot of connections in biology. So we have had a lot of those over the years. The other thing is the environmental science portion of the graph. As I mentioned before, we do have a series that is specifically geared toward environmental projects. And so we have a lot of those. Our hope is that we'll be able to broaden the impact and the distribution, that's the word, of all the other different kinds of sciences. We've had a couple of engineers in the last couple of semesters that have been really great, and we're hoping to continue to broaden the disciplines that we can bring on. So we're gonna kind of go into the different kinds of workshops that we try to do. We have our topical workshops, kind of standalone workshops, conservation projects, and our Mission STEMCAP series. So this is kind of a distribution of 2020 to 2021 of the different kinds of workshops that we did. In our topical workshops category, we have our Science Right Now, Objects from Nature, and Art Science. About 22 Science Right Nows and 24 Art Sciences, more of those than the Objects from Nature. And then we had about 7 conservation projects and 25 Mission STEMCAP workshops. Again, the reason for the number of Mission STEMCAP workshops is we have the Mission STEMCAP is about a 2-week series. So it's everywhere from like 8 to 10 different workshops for a 2-week series at one center. So we were able to do 3 environmental challenges, each of those 2 weeks long.
Great. So like Fiona mentioned, our founder, Dr. Nalini Nadkarni, is a forest ecologist. So we like tree metaphors. And this here is kind of representing, you know, those 3 different types of workshops that Fiona just mentioned. Up here, kind of the leaves of the tree. And then we have the roots down here of academic science and conservation, which are, you know, feeding into this tree. But at the same time, as these community members, these conservationists and academic scientists are giving these workshops, giving these talks, they're actually then receiving sort of, you know, nutrients that are coming down from the leaves back into that soil, in that going to these centers, interacting with these students is, you know, providing them benefits and experiences, providing them new outlooks on their own research, and in some cases actually directly contributing to conservation or to different kinds of projects that scientists are working on. And the more we've built out STEMCAP, the more we have also kind of started to see it as a little bit more of a forest. So, you know, in that previous slide, it's kind of like STEMCAP is this one tree, but in reality, it's not just STEMCAP that's interacting with these youth in custody. So we have, you know, academic scientists, like I said, primarily these people come from University of Utah or other Utah-based universities, but we have had people do virtual lessons from different places all over the country. We also have artists, conservationists, and STEM practitioners. So these are people who, you know, work in museums or for a conservation organization or things like that. And then, of course, the youth in custody teachers. And so STEMCAP actually allows these different groups to really interact in new ways and to collaborate in a way that really tries to help foster a meaningful and enrichment or rich environment for youth in custody here at the center. So within all of these little trees, you know, we can still think of it as this sort of cycling, this two-way street, two-way communication between, you know, the participants of the projects and then the greater communities that are being affected sort of by this relationship.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about a couple of the different kinds of workshops that we do. As I mentioned, we have an art science workshop. So what this is demonstrating in this slide is an art science workshop that we did between an atmospheric scientist that came to us and the Utah Museum of Fine Art. We have an ongoing partnership with them, and they help us with a lot of different projects. This particular one was for our pollution mission STEMCAP. So the idea was that the atmospheric scientist came in and talked about what causes pollution, how particulates are in the air and cause pollution. And then the Utah Museum of Fine Art came up with this great project that allowed the students to kind of play with different paint substances. So like particulates like cocoa powder and cumin, and then we mashed up some organic matter. And basically the students were able to kind of play with the idea of different sizes of particulates interacting with water and creating pollution. So that's kind of, it's an idea of what we're looking for in like an art science workshop. These are a couple of other ones. I believe, Laura, you might have to help me out on a couple of them, but I believe the right one is from a project interacting with the idea of entropy when it came to the Great Salt Lake. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Students created those kind of paintings using bouncy balls, actually. So they put like dots of paint on a piece of paper, put it in a box with bouncy balls and sort of shook it up to, you know, kind of represent entropy and chaos essentially, and related it to how the spiral jetty on the Great Salt Lake can kind of, you know, show us how changes are happening and how things are kind of falling apart.
Yeah. So yeah, those are kind of other projects. And again, we try to find scientists, and then if they're interested in working with an artist, we can try and find an artist who's interested in working with that subject, and we make it work that way. And we make sure that they are able to collaborate on what they think would work. These are other kinds of topical workshops that we have, that we do. So our Science Right Now workshop is basically, we'll have a scientist who is doing research right now, and they come in and they talk about what their research is. They talk about what they do in the lab, the different aspects to their job. They'll also kind of talk about how they got there. But the idea is that, you know, we make the identity of scientists a little more obvious, and like show all the different kinds of ways that scientists are represented. The second one is a portal to science, which was kind of developed over COVID as a virtual way to kind of bring the lab into the classroom. So we're able to kind of allow the students to, or the presenters would, you know, walk around with their iPad and show what their lab looked like and the people who worked in their lab, and the different aspects of their day-to-day job. So I believe that's a picture there of a scientist who works with glass. Last semester, we had a paleontologist who was able to kind of bring us around her lab and show us the biggest bones that she obviously wouldn't have been able to bring anyway. And she showed us, you know, the actual lab where they cut apart the bones and all that kind of stuff. It was very, very cool. I already talked about the art science workshop a little bit. The objects from nature workshop, the idea with that is that it's kind of based at the founding of Dr. Nadkarni's work, but like bringing nature into the places where these students don't really have access to it. So the idea is that because they're kind of effectively incarcerated, they don't really have a lot of outdoor time, space, or ability to go into nature the way they would otherwise. So we want to bring it to them. And so this is a picture of a presenter we had last semester who works with insects, obviously. And so he brought in and talked about a lot of the different bugs that he was able to pin down. And we went outside and we looked at bugs, and it was great. So yeah, those are our 4 main topical kinds of workshops that we'll have.
Great. So then our next type of overall workshop, you know, category is conservation workshops. So one example of that is our Milkweed project. This is sort of our longest running project that we started in 2019. We do this just at one facility right now because, as Fiona kind of mentioned earlier, it's the only facility that has a greenhouse. But basically, a lot of you may know that monarch populations out here in the West are really declining. And a big reason for that is that milkweed has kind of been taken out. Humans really didn't like milkweed for a while, and people were just kind of bringing it out of their gardens, getting it out of parks. They just were getting rid of it. But monarch butterflies need milkweed. It's the only plant that their caterpillars will eat. It's the only plant that they lay their eggs on. So there's a lot of efforts around Utah and out here in the West in general to start growing these native milkweed species back and planting them, not just in sort of restoration areas, but also in people's yards and in parks and sort of all over, so that when the monarchs do migrate through here, they have sort of a lot of different options of places where they can go and sort of form these different kind of, you know, population clusters around the valley. So with that in mind, we partner with a monarch and milkweed specialist who provides us with seeds that are native to Utah. And then the students plant those seeds. You can see here, they're planting them in these little seed starter trays. They then, move them up to slightly bigger pot sizes. And then once they are about 6 inches tall and big enough to be planted outside, our conservation partner then picks them up and delivers them to a bunch of different groups and individuals around Salt Lake Valley. So here is a picture of Utah Conservation Corps planting some of the milkweed that the students grew along the Jordan River Parkway Trail. And so this area, it has water, it has other plants, it has kind of everything that a monarch population would need to sort of set up a breeding ground and lay their eggs, minus the milkweed. So then introducing that milkweed makes this a really healthy habitat for those monarchs. So along with actually planting those, milkweed out into the community, STEMCAP in 2020 created these signs here on the right-hand side that both kind of inform the public about monarchs and milkweed, and also try to highlight the wonderful work that the students have done to grow this milkweed. And this is an effort that we're trying to really push so that the community can be sort of reconnected with this group of people that a lot of community members don't really think of. A lot of people kind of, youth in custody is kind of invisible to them, right? And so these signs are kind of, in addition to educating about monarchs, trying to educate about youth in custody and, that they're capable and caring when it comes to conservation, and that they grew these plants that are now benefiting the community. The sign over here on the left above our STEMCAP sign is a sign that people can basically apply for to say that they have what's called a monarch way station. So this requires flowers, milkweed, and water for the monarchs. And so this picture here shows a monarch way station that the center where we grew the milkweed is currently working on putting together. So they have this little bowl up here with water. They planted a bunch of other flowers, and then here's their milkweed that they grew on site. And STEMCAP also provided them with an educational sign for their visitors, so that when people are coming into this center to visit students who are incarcerated there, they can learn about this environmental issue, and they can also see, some of the cool projects and the cool work that students in this center are working on. To date, students at this center have raised approximately 3,000 milkweed plants that have been planted all around Salt Lake Valley. So it's been a very fun and successful project. This diagram is a little funky. Okay, there we go. So our next category is Mission STEMCAP. Mission STEMCAP is that environmental challenge, that 2-week series that Fiona mentioned. And this is basically a series where each center that we work with focuses on a different grand challenge. These are the grand challenges here. So the way that we came up with these 5 grand challenges is actually that we didn't come up with them. A group of Stanford scientists got together and tried to come up with the 5 greatest threats to humankind right now. And these were those 5 challenges. So we used that data and that paper to kind of form the foundation for why we were using these as the themes for our project. So kind of after we select a theme, what we kind of do then is find a documentary series that relates to that theme for the students to watch. We find 1 or 2 scientists who work on that general issue and kind of approach them about working with us on this project. We also partner with the Utah Museum of Fine Arts, and they create a whole curated virtual museum tour around the issue. And then we do an art science workshop with an artist, we're with the art educators from the Utah Museum of Fine Arts, a poetry or other creative writing workshop, and then what we call starting a conversation, where students learn about a variety of ways to communicate about grand challenges and just kind of communication methods in general, and then get a chance to write down sort of what they think the main points they would want to talk to someone about regarding that challenge would be. So these are some examples of work that students have done during the Mission STEMCAP series. So this is 2 pictures from 2 different pollution Mission STEMCAPs that we did. On the left-hand side, this is a habitat book that a student made where they have depicted different pollutants that might be found in the ocean. And then they drew this fish that would inhabit that ocean. and they kind of talked through a story of, what it might have looked like before the pollution and how that pollution might be affecting the fish. On the right-hand side, we have a little solar powered car. And this was brought to us by someone who works for a solar company. And basically they led a whole workshop about solar and how it can reduce air pollution and how, it could be beneficial here in Utah. And then they had the students make these little cars and take them outside and kind of race them in the sunlight using that solar panel. This is an example from actually our very first Mission STEMCAP where students studied extinction. This is one of their creative writing assignments where they basically wrote paragraphs about a specific now extinct species. And then between each paragraph, they were encouraged to kind of write 2 short lines of poetry style writing and try to, in those lines, convey more of like a feeling or, what it might have been like to have been that species as it was undergoing extinction. And then they kind of cut these different pieces up and created this large collaborative poster as a class. These are 2 other examples of art that we've done in Mission STEMCAP. So on the left-hand side, this is in a gamma graph. And essentially it is a piece of paper that you sort of cut into pieces and then glue so that when you look at it in one sort of orientation, you're seeing one image. And when you look at it in a different orientation, then what you're seeing is totally different. So in this example, when you're looking at it one way, it's sort of green fields and water and trees everywhere. And then when you're looking at it the other way, it's just this big hot sun and a tree with no leaves on it that's sort of dying. And we did that for part of our climate change series. And then on the right, we did this collage project with the Utah Museum of Fine Arts. And it was using sort of different materials that people had sort of thrown away or that were seen as trash, like used stamps or newspapers, and then turning that into art and sort of thinking about reuse and, recycling materials. So back to our STEMCAP forest. One thing that, we really try to emphasize in Mission STEMCAP is that youth in custody really are at the center of this. And they're not just kind of inhabiting this forest, but they are actually actively engaging in and interacting with the other members of this forest community. So Mission STEMCAP's main goal is to help students understand and then propose solutions to the grand challenges by studying the challenge, doing sort of different reflection activities, and then, exchanging ideas with each other and with presenters. And the idea is that resources from STEMCAP, from teachers, and from students can all go towards ameliorating this grand challenge. So STEMCAP provides resources through the workshops that we bring. And then teacher resources include things like educational materials, teaching expertise, their support and knowledge of the students, like their close relationship with these students they've been working with. And then the student resources are what they actually create during the series. So poetry, they've written letters in the past, they've created art, and all of these things are ways for them to both reflect on and then communicate about that grand challenge in a way that could help make a difference. But kind of underlying all of this, a main goal of Mission STEMCAP is also to help students see that the whole process of collaborating, communicating, and going through these different types of problem-solving techniques, this process can be used to find new ways to think about sort of any problem and share ideas with other people to help make a difference in their own lives or in their own communities. So we want to kind of highlight for students that they can work with each other, they can work with teachers, they can work with other community members to really be able to find maybe, stronger solutions to challenges in their lives that maybe would be more tricky if they were trying to just sort of tackle those on their own. And we kind of highlight science as well as an important part of that problem solving process. So in addition to our programming, we do evaluation. So we do surveys of the presenters and the teachers. We do presenter interview and focus groups, teacher interview and focus groups, and student quizzes. So you'll see on here that we unfortunately do not do surveys or interviews of students. We wish that we could do that, but we We also want to value and respect the decisions of the Institutional Review Board, which is basically a board that oversees, different types of social science research. And essentially, anyone under the age of 18 and anyone who's incarcerated are considered vulnerable populations. So this means that you have to have a lot of sort of extra permissions to actually survey or interview those types of people for their protection. So we found it very challenging to kind of get those permissions, primarily because, understandably, the Institutional Review Board really wanted us to have parental permission in order to have these interactions with students in terms of surveys and interviews. And as Fiona said at the very beginning, we don't interact with parents at all. We're actually, for security reasons, we're not allowed to know students' last names or know who their parents are or anything like that. And so getting consent from parents was incredibly challenging. And it just turned out to be, more trouble than it was worth in terms of actually trying to, it ended up taking away from the programming, which is our primary concern. So we started doing quizzes last year as a way to sort of directly assess how youth in custody are sort of engaging with these workshops. So, our primary goal isn't necessarily for them to learn what malaria is, as opposed to just kind of learning about science and the scientific process. But these quizzes do still give us a sense of, maybe how much the students are paying attention, is the content at their appropriate level for them, and those kinds of things. So we did find that in 87.5% of our workshops, youth in custody performed better on the post-quiz than on the pre-quiz. 60% on average scored higher on that post-quiz, while only 12% scored lower. So this does help us kind of get a sense that we are providing, content that is at the right age level, and that students are really paying attention and engaging and listening because they are taking in that information. This past school year, we started working with the Utah Education Policy Center, or UEPC, which is on the University of Utah campus. And we worked with this group to help us find sort of more robust ways to figure out sort of what presenters and teachers and STEMCAP administrators, or like USB administrators, were taking away from this experience, and what their perception of student benefits were. So we worked with the UEPC to kind of mold our main, evaluation questions, and then they came up with a bunch of data sources for us that could be used to sort of answer those questions. One really great thing about working with the UEPC was that we, had them actually do the interviews and the surveys, which is really useful because sometimes when we would try to, ask for constructive feedback, people maybe didn't feel comfortable telling us anything that they, wanted us to change. And, they were very positive, which is great, but it's also great to get maybe some more really straightforward feedback. And we think that having this external person asking them that question can maybe help make sure that they don't feel pressured to say maybe what we want them to say or things like that. So the UEPC conducted a total of 6 focus groups and 11 interviews. So they worked with presenters in groups of 3 to 6, asking them questions and allowing them to kind of play off of each other's answers and discuss together kind of the benefits they see of the program, anything they maybe would like the program to do differently, things like that. And also to talk about kind of how they perceived student interactions and engagement. 9 of the presenters who did focus groups were then selected for one-on-one interviews, where the UEPC talked to them longer form, asked them more questions, and tried to really, get a little bit more in-depth data, qualitative data about their presentations. The UEPC also interviewed 2 of our youth in custody teachers that we work with. So these are the science teachers that are, again, employed by the Utah State Board of Education that teach in these classrooms that are within these youth in custody centers. And then 2 Utah State Board of Education administrators were also interviewed. So these are people who work at the school board level, but have direct oversight and interaction with STEMCAP since they are our funding source. So using kind of all of this data that they got in the form of long answers from presenters and teachers and administrators. The UEPC then created what's called a code book of those responses, where they basically organized them into categories and themes. They kind of looked for common patterns and threads, and then were able to take those and kind of make some somewhat, concrete statements about what they were finding. So examples of themes include, and these are kind of the exact language that the UEPC used, since they're presenting this as data. I just kept that same language, so it's a little lengthy, but I thought it was best to provide exactly what they provided to us. So STEMCAP lessons prioritize students' curiosity and engagement through flexible, interactive, hands-on design. STEMCAP lessons highlighted various pathways to science by emphasizing the scientists come from a variety of backgrounds. So again, this is something that we were really happy to hear, because this is a pretty big underlying thing that we're pushing for in STEMCAP, is to really highlight that, scientists and just anyone engaging in STEM comes from a variety of backgrounds and has gotten to that point in different ways. The UEPC also found that our program utilizes teachers' own expertise in sort of managing classrooms and connecting to curriculum, and for supporting the presenters during class. So I don't know if we really mentioned this too much, but these presentations that we do with STEMCAP primarily take place in the science classroom. So we bring the presenter in during that science class period, and the teacher is in the room. So the teacher can really be helpful in terms of helping students engage, letting the presenter know if maybe the students are confused about something, and just making sure that the presenter, feels comfortable in the classroom, knows where everything is, all of those kinds of things. STEMCAP staff provided helpful, actionable guidance to presenters to support effective lessons in STEMCAP program and beyond. So this is kind of part of our process, is that we really like to meet with the presenter, go through their presentation with them, and ensure that they feel really comfortable about going in the center, and that their slides and the language that they're using are going to be accessible to the students. So that's something that we work on with every presenter. STEMCAP helped presenters to reconceptualize and share their work in a different way. This was something that we were kind of happy to hear. When we first started STEMCAP, we didn't think too much about, what impact it would have on the presenters. But then we started to get feedback from presenters in really positive ways about how it affected them personally and professionally. And so this was something that we wanted the UEPC to kind of more formally evaluate. And we found that it was pretty cool to hear that a lot of the presenters, part of what they took away from STEMCAP was, that reconceptualizing in terms of students asking them questions that maybe other scientists wouldn't have asked them, that made them think differently about their work. Students would ask them things like, why does this matter? And presenters would say, wow, that's really a direct question. And it does make me think, like, why does this matter? Why am I doing this? And it kind of helped them to evaluate, what it is that they value about their work and all of those things. So that's kind of an overview of our program. We definitely welcome any questions from anyone. And we'd love to kind of hear from you about maybe why you're here and what you'd like to learn more about in terms of STEMCAP and youth in custody programming in general.
We also welcome you to look at our website if you want to work with us.
Yes. Our website is stemcap.org. If you're interested in presenting with us, we have a presenter form. You can go to the Get Involved page on our website and fill out the form. It just has a few questions about kind of your work and what you'd like to present on. We don't ever reject anyone from presenting. We just like to have the form to help us keep all that information in one place and be able to contact you as soon as we start scheduling for a new semester.
We also want to say, if you don't have any questions now, but you want to email one of us, you can email Laura or myself later on.
Yeah, and just kind of as an additional side note, We recently hired a new conservation project coordinator. So increasing our conservation projects is something we're really interested in and really pushing for. So if any of you, have conservation ideas or projects that you're interested in working with us on, definitely reach out to us. We are hoping to really expand conservation work to different centers and to kind of move beyond our mainly plant growing focused conservation projects at this time. We're definitely interested in things like building bird nest boxes and really any hands-on project that would get the students involved in conservation. We do have various limitations at different centers in terms of supplies and things like that. But we also are pretty good at getting creative with that kind of thing. And we definitely have found that the conservation projects are really meaningful to the students at Decker Lake. So we're really interested in expanding those out to more of our centers. And to do that, we're looking for more community partners.
And to reference the question in the chat, we can't really take students on field trips because they're in secure care. Basically, they're not allowed to leave the premises. Laura, I might be like, do day skills intervention kids, can they go out?
Yeah, so we do work with one group that is able to go on field trips. We have really been wanting to get a field trip going. So far, we had just started planning for a field trip to the campus where students were going to go to the art museum and then come over and see some of our science labs right before COVID. And so since then, things have really been on hold. It's been kind of hard enough to get into the centers, let alone get the students out of the centers with COVID. So, but that is something we're interested in. Again, we only have one group that we work with that is sort of able to do that. Most of the students are really not able to leave the center at all, unfortunately. So we do try to think of ways to kind of bring field trips into the classroom, whether it's, a Zoom field trip, or if you all, wherever you work, have, materials that you can bring into the classroom to sort of lead as if it was a field trip, but in the classroom or in the courtyard at these facilities.
Getting so many questions now.
I know.
I think Laura mentioned, like, in terms of barriers that we're facing in the program, I think Laura mentioned this, like not being able to like record what the students actually are getting out of the program, and like trying to get that very hard data about that is kind of a challenge. And as she said, like we have tried to do a lot of things that work around that barrier, including this UEPC study that we're doing. But yeah, do you have anything else?
Yeah, it looks like a lot of you are really kind of interested in this idea of challenges. I would say that, working in an incarcerated facility, we also work with the prison and the jail for a different program that we work on. There's always challenges in that, the educational side of things is not necessarily the biggest priority at these centers. So the teachers that are working there, their priority is education. They're wonderful. Most of the staff we interact with at these centers are wonderful, regardless of what they're there to do. But at the end of the day, the most important thing at that center is the safety and the security of the students. And so there are times when we hear at the last minute that students actually aren't going to be able to come to class because they're on a security lockdown. We're, pretty limited at some of our centers in terms of what supplies we can bring in. So we do have to get pretty creative. Some centers don't even allow, Sharpies or paintbrushes or colored pencils. So those are things that we've gotten a lot better at sort of, being flexible with as we've grown in the past, 4.5 years, but definitely still challenges. And I think another challenge is just sort of the whole dynamic of youth in custody classrooms is pretty different in that most of these centers put all of the students per housing unit in the same class, regardless of what grade of school they are in outside of the center. So we might have a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old in the same class, which can definitely be a challenge in terms of trying to make sure that that 18-year-old is stimulated and engaged, while also making sure that the content isn't over the capacity of that 13-year-old. So this is something that the teachers are really helpful with. They're very good at kind of letting us know what level the general student is at in every class because they work with them day to day. But it is a challenge, just having sort of that wide age range.
Let's see.
In terms of favorite parts about being involved in the program, I definitely love any days when we get to actually go into the center. So our job is half kind of administrative planning and preparing these programs, and then half actually getting to go to them. So going into the centers is super fun. I especially like the conservation projects and Mission STEMCAP, both because I have an environmental background and because those longer term programs, we really get to know the students. And I find both that that's rewarding to kind of, build those relationships. Personally, I enjoy that, but also I find that the students really open up a lot more the more they get to know us. They engage with us more, they ask more questions, they answer more questions, they feel a lot more comfortable. So doing, a 2-week series or doing the Milkweed project where we go in once a week for 6 weeks, we really build a stronger sort of rapport with those students, which I really enjoy.
And something we didn't mention is like most of the time our classes are about 4 or 5 students. Like we don't work with very large classrooms. And so we really like, especially when we're doing like a Mission STEMCAP where we're there every day for 2 weeks, like we really get to know these students, we get to talk to them, and we get to have these individual relationships that wouldn't happen if the classes were 20 or 25 students. And it is really funny to see like how much attention they're getting from us and the teachers, like compared to maybe what they were feeling in a regular high school. Like they're able to talk to us and ask us like, why did you do that? Why are you doing this job? What are you doing here and stuff? And we get to talk to them about that. That's probably one of my favorite parts, is just like you kind of, one thing, I think a story that one of our co-workers shared is like, a lot of these boys, like a lot of the boys that we work with are kind of, hyper masculine, they're kind of macho. And there's one conservation project where they brought in, they were doing seed saving, and you just kind of saw these like kind of macho boys like sorting out the seeds very carefully one by one, and you got to talk to them about it. And it's so lovely to see them kind of open up and be generous and vulnerable with you. But yeah, as Laura said, going into the centers makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it's super cool. The conservation projects, like working with plants, has been a really cool experience with these young men, because similarly to what Fiona just said, I remember last year asking the students like a fun fact about plants that related to their life. And at first their teacher's like, oh, they're not going to have any. And then they all did have stories, and they'd be like, oh, I just love roses. They're just so beautiful and delicate. And again, it's like, these teenage guys that try to act really like tough. And so just hearing them talk about like these flowers that they really like was super cool. And just like being able to kind of, talk to them in that sort of almost one-on-one way, because the classes are so small, is really awesome.
Okay, a couple of questions here just so we can catch up. Let's see. How do you get the word about this program with teachers, and does we have a national network?
So in terms of getting the word out to teachers, there's really not that many youth in custody centers in Utah. I mean, there's, I want to say 17 or somewhere around there. We are a little bit limited in terms of how far we can go. So we are trying to expand to further centers through Zoom and through maybe partnering with other institutions in the state. But primarily in terms of getting the word out to teachers, we have basically worked with our USBE colleagues and said, what are the centers in our vicinity that you think this programming would be beneficial at? And then those people can then introduce us to those teachers. We do have a spot on our website for teachers to request our programming. We have had teachers at, one center tell teachers at another center about our work, and then those teachers have sort of reached out to us. That's essentially how we got our newest 2 centers. But, it's not too challenging in terms of getting the word out, just because there's really, not that many science teachers that work in youth in custody. And our capacity, we're hoping will grow, but right now we're kind of at capacity in terms of the amount of centers we can work in right now. And then in terms of STEMCAP existing in other states, we actually are happy to announce that we just finished writing a 70-page handbook that we are going to start sort of shopping around, trying to distribute to institutions across the country that kind of details how to start a program like this, how to recruit scientists and artists, kind of how to train up your presenters, and kind of all of the lessons we've learned over the past few years. So we're really hoping that, other institutions will want to take us up on that. We are currently working with University of North Carolina to try and get a STEMCAP chapter started there. And we were lucky enough that our partners at the Utah State Board of Education were willing to sort of write them a letter to give to their State Board of Education, kind of saying, this is why this program is beneficial. So they're hoping to get a pilot program done in the next semester or so. So we're hoping to expand more nationwide, but right now we're just in Utah.
And then the last question here is, what are the biggest needs at this time or areas we hope to grow in?
I would say the biggest needs would probably be like staff, which is why I'm really excited that we just hired a new conservation coordinator. Our program started out pretty small. So on that slide where we had sort of the table of the different amounts of programming that we've done, we at the end of spring 2021, we had done 197 workshops, and 84 of those were in 2020 to 2021. So the first 3 years of the program, we were doing like 10 and then like 30 and then 40 workshops. And we're now up to doing about 100 a year. So we're expanding really quickly, and our centers are constantly kind of asking us for more. So the biggest, I guess, challenge at this point is just having the capacity. The team really is mostly me and Fiona. We have one other very part-time coordinator who works 10% time on this project. And then we have our director. So that, there's just the 3 1/10 of us right now. And so, being able to have the capacity to work with more partners and be able to bring more programming is sort of the barrier we're up against right now.
And we are at the moment like working with a 5-year contract. I think we're in year 2 of that 5-year contract, and we'll resubmit and hopefully get more money and maybe get more staff and grow, and hopefully that's like the start of something that is getting bigger. But yeah, we are at the moment a small staff. And then I think Laura also mentioned we're hiring a part-time conservation coordinator starting in February, and so we'll have hopefully that part of our programming expanding and proliferating. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, there are so many questions. I wrote down a couple, and then I was like, wow, I didn't even think of a question that good. That was
yeah, thank you guys so much for being so engaged. We appreciate it.
I will hit stop on this recording.